But I did want to say a quick welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Again, this is the first time we're hosting an event in celebration of Women's History Month. And I do want to set a reminder, this is a time for us to celebrate and learn from the accomplishments of women that are making an impact in different sectors across industries. So thank you so much to everybody that is joining us for this event. The purpose of this event is also for us, in addition to highlighting the achievements of alumni in our community, is for us to be able to connect and build that connection between our students that are close to graduating and then also our alumni community. So hopefully after this event this evening, you're able to get to know a little bit more about what our alumni have been up to, the careers that they have taken on, what steps they took in order to build success within their career and industry sector, and also just broaden your network and ideas of what you can do once you graduate. For the alumni that are present, we also hope that you're able to gain insight into what different careers look like. Perhaps some of the alumni that are here today with us share a similar interest with you. So hopefully that gives you insight into different career paths that our alumni have taken. And again, a very special thank you to our panelists. I will introduce them a little further on in the discussion, but I want to say a special thank you to you all. This is just one of the ways that you're able to give back. And so we want to share that all of us here at the Colin Powell School community, thank you for your support and your commitment to us. I do want to encourage our students, but also the alumni present here for you to be able to connect with the alumni speakers. So we will share more information on how you could do that towards the end of the presentation. But just to keep in mind, networking is very important. And the reminder as well, if you're able to turn on your cameras, please do so. It really does help build that connection. I know we're on Zoom, but it does help to see your face online. And in preparation for the end, we will have a Q&A session. So keep in mind, just prepare your questions for the end. I'll pass it on to Cynthia for some quick remarks as well. Cynthia.
Thanks, Leslie. It's so
Yeah.
wonderful to see so many students and alumni and our staff here today. And I just want to give a quick shout out and applause to Leslie for putting together today's panel. It takes a lot of work to get this aligned and recruited for. So, I just want to make sure we celebrate Leslie's work on this important work that she's doing to engage alums, but also bring them forward so that students can be inspired and learn from our illustrious alumni. So as Leslie mentioned, today's panel is more than just like reflecting on the fact that it's Women's History Month, but it's really about recognizing the impact that our women alumni have made in their fields and to learn from their experiences to inspire the next generation to continue breaking barriers and forging new paths. It's been a difficult few months, I have to say, but we really are honored to have an incredible lineup of alumni with us today. And we hope that they're here to share their insights, that you hear about their challenges, but also their successes, and that their journeys reflect strength, resilience, and they can inspire us as we move forward um, in our society. So I just want to thank you all for being here today and for contributing to this like important dialogue. And if we can just like get together and join me in welcoming our panelists, use your emojis. If you can turn on your cameras, and I'm going to turn it over to Leslie so we can start our panel. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. And I do get the privilege of speaking to so many of you. So it is really a privilege to get to know your careers with much more depth and also much more detail into what you do. So I hope that tonight is also an opportunity for other people to get to see what you do and the incredible work that you're building. So I'm just going to give a quick introduction into the work that you all do. Just to give details on structure, we'll go into different topics with questions. So I'll make sure to address them to you as we go along. And then towards the end, we'll have about 10 minutes for us to get questions from the audience. And one thing that I will note is that a lot of this was built with input from the people that signed up. So students that signed up, alumni that signed up, if they submitted questions, then we tried our best to incorporate that into the panel discussion. So hopefully some of your questions are answered as well. So very first up, Dr. Judith Gil is a dedicated clinical social work professional with over 25 years of experience in leadership, education, and mental health services. She earned her BA in psychology from the City College of New York before pursuing an advanced degrees in social work, including a doctorate in advanced clinical social work from the University of Pennsylvania. As the Deputy Director of Behavioral and Mental Health at Children's Aid in NYC, Dr. Hill oversees critical programs that provide high quality behavioral health services to youth and families, while also advocating for representation and equity in the human services field. So thank you, Dr. Judith.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for joining. Next up, Emily Rodriguez is a Black traditional birth and postpartum doula, medical anthropologist, and dedicated advocate for Black maternal health. She earned her degree from the City College of New York, where she focused on medical anthropology that then laid the foundation for her work in reproductive justice. As the founder of Ashe Birthing Services and co-founder of the Bridge Directory, Emily is transforming maternal health care by bridging access gaps, training institutions, and leading policy change for doula pay equity and accessibility. So welcome, Emily. Aisha Fuenzalida is a PhD student in the Department of Anthropology at Cornell University, where she currently is researching the impacts of environmental protections and conservation efforts on coastal communities in the Canary Islands. She earned her bachelor's degree in anthropology with a minor in women's and gender studies from the City College of New York, where she graduated as valedictorian of the Colin Powell School. Through archaeological and ethnographic methods, Aisha's work critically examines conservation models, centering local and indigenous communities between the knowledge to develop policy-relevant insights for mitigating climate change effects on vulnerable communities. Welcome, Aisha. And last but not least, Allison Jennifer Cook, is a leader in community outreach, business development, and youth empowerment. She is a graduate of the City College of New York and has dedicated her career to supporting underserved communities and is currently leading volunteer recruitment and engagement for Union Anson County Habitat for Humanity. As the founder of Coexist Research and consulting firm and CEO of JCOO LLC, Allison drives impactful initiatives for marketing, program development, and residential construction, while also serving on multiple boards and mentoring future leaders. Welcome, Allison. So that's a brief introduction of our panel speakers. And again, welcome and thank you for supporting on this effort. We really appreciate the work that you're doing. So the very first topic that we want to touch base on is related to career journeys and what inspired you to pursue those career passions. So I'll start with Dr. Judith with the question of what led you to pursue a career in mental health and social work? And to add on to that question, how has that role evolved since graduating from the City College of New York?
Yes, all the way back in 1998. So we're talking about 27 years ago. Oh, like this is really exciting. I just have to add, Leslie, that I was very excited when you reached out about a year ago because in full transparency, I had not been in touch with City College since I graduated in 98. So when I got that email, I'm like, what a great opportunity to be reconnected with the institution, with students, with alumni. So thanks for that. But yeah, so I was always someone who was particularly interested, even as a young girl, young adolescent, on like the human mind and the human condition, family structures, right? And as a teenager in high school, I had a guidance counselor who was very super instrumental to me even graduating high school. Again, just to share a little bit of my personal trajectory. I was a teenage mom, so I had a child at 15. So I was a junior in high school when I became a parent, but it was through the help of a helping professional and his advocacy for me to remain in this Catholic high school that I was in, that I was able to get into college, right? And he helped me out with the application process, the financial aid process. And as a first generation student, he was my only resource, right? My parents tried the best that they could, with whatever resources, little resources they had. So I knew that in addition to like me just having that innate desire to learn about the human mind, learn about human conditions, I also had this event that happened in my own life that led me into this field. While at City College, there were no social work sort of degrees, and the closest thing that came to that was psychology. And so, I remember being a sophomore and having to identify or declare my major. And this was the closest that came to, what I wanted to do, which was work with people, right? Help people. So I graduated with my degree. I worked in the field of, it was like an entry-level position as a social worker, not a social worker, a case manager, case manager at different social service agencies. At that, back then, if you had a BA in psychology, sociology, you basically had the requirements that were needed for those entry-level positions. So I worked in the field for about 9 years. And it was through my work in different community organizations and working with children, with adolescents, with families in different capacities, with schools, that I knew, I'm like, okay, I've been in this for 8 years, but I also know that I need an advanced degree to be able to advance. Obviously earn more money, right? Let's keep it real. So I then, pursued my master's degree in social work from Fordham. Did that, after that, I started working with, in a more clinical, therapeutic way with clients, again, families, children, adolescents. And I worked in that capacity for another 8 years. And then in 2014, I got that educational itch again. I'm like, yeah, let's go back to school. And I had a super deep interest in conducting research on promoted factors that facilitated educational success among women who were once teenage mothers, and how they were able to attain college degrees despite the different barriers, both personal and systemic. So I started the coursework at the University of Pennsylvania in 2014. I finished in 2018. Since then, I have experience in every realm of social work. So direct practice, supervision, program administration, education, research. And it's just been, I would have never imagined when I graduated in 97 from City College. I used to call it City back in, I don't know if students still call it City. But when I graduated back then, I would have never imagined that my trajectory and my career would have taken the sort of leaps that it's taken. And so, but I do owe some of this to my time at City College. There were professors, and I'll stop because I don't want to, take the time, but there were professors that were very understanding of my situation. I mean, I started college at 18 with a 2-year-old, and there were a lot of professors who were understanding of that, granted extensions. I wasn't aware of student parent organizations on campus at that time. I'm sure it's changed now, but it was through the help of a lot of professors that I was able to attain my degree the way that I did. And so it's really nice to kind of be here now. It's like a full circle moment for me. So thanks again, Leslie, for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And honestly, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. There's so much power in that story. When I first heard about it, you as a student, as a mother, having to balance classes, work, right? And then deciding what you wanted to pursue after graduating, right? So that's very inspiring. So thank you for joining us tonight. Emily, for you, I know you founded Ashe Birthing Services as well as the Bridge Directory to address disparities that exist in maternal health. I'm interested to know what inspired you to take action in this space and what also inspired you to launch these initiatives that you developed.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Judith, for sharing. That is really inspiring to be a doctor now and to navigate everything that you were going through. I can only imagine as a teenager and a young mom. So thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing that story. Um, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian until I started working at a veterinary clinic and realized that they have to really they're not really working with animals as much as they are managing animal parents. And so I think that I worked at 3 animal hospitals in the city, and that's what I started my city college journey was in medicine, and then I found anthropology through a professor, Dr. Maggie Witten, who I'm still in contact with, 12, 13 years later. And she introduced me to medical anthropology, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this. And I did my first ethnography while at City College on doulas, and that exposed me to birth work. But it wasn't until I got pregnant. I was 27 at the time of graduating because I had gone to vet tech school, and life was lifing, right? So I didn't graduate at 21 like I thought I would, and 27 I really loved being a late graduate because I knew more about who I was as a person and what I wanted. And so when I got pregnant, though, I realized I didn't know anything about my body. Sex ed in like elementary, middle, high school was non-existent. I didn't know how to navigate the healthcare system in the United States. And when I went to Mount Sinai West, because that's where everyone told me to go, I experienced racism. Then I traveled an hour away to Brooklyn Birthing Center, which is still our only birthing center in all of New York City. And I was also experienced, racism there by white midwives that, asked me if I had ever smoked weed, and I said yes. And so they put me as like a drug threat, and I don't even know what they were like, how are you processing your birth? And I was, or your pregnancy? And I was like, oh, it was unexpected. And they put me as like a depression risk. And it was just like a crazy experience. And so I went to a doula that I knew, and she was like, why don't you have a home birth? And I was like, a home birth for my first experience? And she's like, yeah, you could talk to a midwife out of hospital and see how you feel. And so I was living at the Bronx at the time, and I had a really empowering birth experience with a Black midwife who's since retired, Mamanie Sinkyu, and in my home. And it was amazing. And I had a doula and I had a midwife there. And that's really what propelled me into doula work, because I wanted to be that support that other people had given me. And so I started Ashe Birthing Services with actually Dr. Griselda Rodriguez Solomon, who still works at City College as a professor, who is a dear friend of mine. And so we founded Ashe Birthing Services together, and then she went off to do Brujas of Brooklyn with her twin sister. And so now Ashe is a team of 15 Black and Brown doulas based in the Bronx that serves over 400 families a year. And, because of maternal mortality in New York City, which is 12 times our white counterparts, we were getting, phone calls from folks that were also in the same position that I was in, that was like, I'm scared to give birth, and I'm scared of racism, and I'm scared to die. And how do I have an empowering birth experience? And so, and how do I find providers? Like, people were calling us saying, like, I heard through the grapevine that you were a Black doula. And I was like, through the grapevine. So that's what caused us to build the Bridge Directory, which is a free platform to find perinatal providers of color in New York City and New York State. And so people can get on and say, I'm looking for a pediatrician that speaks Wolof in Queens and find that. And so I think that, my advocacy has been in response to finding the solutions that we need for creating them ourselves, because if not us, whom, who will do that? And so, yeah, I'm really happy to be here and share as much as I can.
Thank you so much, Emily. Another initiative and story that's so impactful. And also, when I first heard about it, I thought it's such an important and much needed initiative within our community. So, again, thank you for the work that you're doing in this area. Next up is Aisha. Your research focuses. I know your research focuses on ecotourism, conservation, and environmental policy. So if you could tell us a little bit about what sparked your interest in these areas, and how did you carve out a career in this field? And if you could share also what role did the Colin Powell School play in shaping that for you? Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to see like old faces and new ones. So it's really so wonderful to be here. But I think at a young age, my mom would like often find me glued to the TV watching Nat Geo specials. And like these images of tropical landscapes and sea turtles just really captivated me. And I didn't know at the time, but I was being fed this very romanticized and cookie cutter type of conservation and environmentalism. And I also grew up in Staten Island, the Forgotten Borough, which is like a site of toxic dumping. But it also had the world's largest landfill at one point that was like rumored to be so big that you could see it from space. So I think these were very formative for me, and that they fostered like my love for nature, but they also deepened my awareness of like the inequalities around me, and essentially fueled my passion for like social, racial, and environmental justice. And I would say like through a combination of like coursework, studying abroad, fellowships, and working with diverse like communities and organizations, that's what I have found to be the most joyful and helpful for me. So I was an anthro major and a women's studies minor, but I also created my own curriculum. So I think having the freedom to have an interdisciplinary approach was like amazing for me. So I took classes in EAS, archaeology, anthro, and that allowed me to really integrate like sociocultural and biological perspectives when thinking about climate crises. And I would say studying abroad was probably the most impactful experience for me, in learning and like having a learning approach that extended beyond the classroom. And I think it equipped me with a more holistic understanding of how environmentalism and conservation materialize on the ground. And I also say this as like a low income student. So like I never thought, like I had never been on a plane before, but like through scholarships, I was able to study abroad in Costa Rica, the Galapagos, and Australia. So this really helped me like gain that like hands-on field experience working with local communities, but also wildlife in these conservation contexts. So I think through volunteering with NGOs, this allowed me to observe firsthand like the challenges of conservation projects and also how they affected people that were living there in the communities. In terms of fellowships, I was a Mellon Mays and Climate Policy Fellow, so I think this was wonderful in that it connected me with students that were just as passionate as me, that were so intelligent, and just spaces that I found to be so joyful. And Mellon Mays is a program that like allowed me to develop my own research project and kind of demystified the pathway to getting a PhD. I'm the first, like a first gen student and the first in my family to apply and like get a PhD. So like having that support was really important. And then I would also say the village that I had at the Colin Powell School. So like my mentors, Professor Matthew Riley, Professor Thangaraj, the anthro department, the staff, there's too many people that like I would need to list, but like they invested so much time and energy in helping me explore my interests. And like where I am today is because of like all their kindness. So I guess I really just want to stress the importance of developing these relationships with professors and mentors early on in your careers, because it really makes a world of a difference. And like we've heard other panelists say, like we're still in contact with our mentors. We still call them because they're like such a great support system, and like we have so much love for each other and care. So I think that's really wonderful.
Aisha, I really do like that you mentioned that aspect of community towards the end, because I also do hope that that's a message that everybody takes, that as a student, you have a community of faculty, staff, peers, that are invested in your success. But even after you graduate, you then transition into a community of alumni that are across different industries, across different sectors, right? So it is very important that you stay connected. So thank you for sharing that as well. And one thing that is inspiring as well about your story is that you took advantage of resources that were offered to you. And that eventually led you to figure out what your passion was. So thank you for sharing more about your story. Um, Next up is Allison. Allison, I know you've built two businesses while also leading community outreach at Habitat for Humanity. If you could tell us a little bit about what drives your work, and also how are you able to balance the work of entrepreneurship as well as the nonprofit sector that you're involved with? Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, panelists. I mean, hearing each of you, I am more inspired, and I can see why Leslie selected us to be here today. Dr. Judith, I really resonated with your story, and I think we crossed paths in our life because my first job out of city was at Children's Aid. And I too am a teen parent, and I also get the education bug. Like the itch just, and actually it came last night, and I was looking at a school in Miami. So I I would like to talk more about that. And I just want to say to all the students here, opportunities like this is where you'll see that you're not alone in your journey, and that you can build a tribe with people that you never thought uh you didn't even know existed. But with that, what drove me to build two businesses? I preach that I am the sum of all of my experiences, and skills and passion meet, and then there's me. So wherever you are with skills and passion, like for me, it's always following my skills, but in this circle of my passion. So I kind of consider myself the up and coming lady Warren Buffett. So I plan to build more businesses. My other hero would be Vernon Jordan. And Burton Jordan, when you look him up, because you should, his life was about being the silent leader. So when President Clinton had asked him to come and be the attorney general, he said, "I would rather be your friend." And I took that philosophy with me in my life. And initially, I didn't think I would be an entrepreneur or a business leader until I realized that I was very unconventional, and that I had so much passion for different things that I would apply for jobs and they'll say, "Well, I can see you in this role or this role or that role." And I'm like, I can do it all. And I think having that confidence to take on the unforeseeable future with faith and fearlessness is what got me here today. Um, Also, I am like kind of zenful, so I'm always like, what's the balance between this? How could I travel and have adventure and live my life and not feel bound by society and what they think a woman should look like and how women should behave? So I like to disrupt things. I go into industries and I say, hey, I'm going to create something new. So I'm actually coming back from my business induction. I'm really excited today. I had the mayor of the city that I live in come out, and the Chamber of Commerce and their board president and a whole bunch of people in the community come out to see my business be induced into the Chamber of Commerce here in Lancaster County, South Carolina, which is where I live, and develop homes. And a part of that journey, I felt like something was missing. Like, I'm adding to this community. I'm from New York. Am I one of those developers that just came here and built something? And when I asked myself that question, I said, I could never be like that. So I joined the Habitat for Humanity mission, which is really near and dear to my heart because it's a nonprofit organization that's mission is to put God's love into action. And as a Christian woman who believes that my faith has guided me throughout my life and I'm building in this community, I really wanted to be a part of affordable housing. And not only as a person that could say, hey, I can donate some money, but to be on their board. So I'm actually on the board of a chamber, sorry, of the board of a habitat, and I work full time at another Habitat for Humanity, which I actually went in there as a volunteer. So I also just wanted to speak on that. Volunteerism has elevated my life. I've always been a person that believed if I give a little, I'll get a lot, but I never go into it thinking, what am I going to get? What usually happens is I get there, I show up, I have integrity, I do what I got to do, and blessings pour in from there. Sometimes not even from that organization, but a person that came in off the street. So I encourage people to volunteer. And I'll also say that being a teen mom and being able to balance motherhood and school throughout most of my life, all of my adulthood, has led me to believe that I can do more. And all I needed was to balance with rest. So more and rest is sort of my mission to achieve on a daily basis. And I also like to be impactful with the work that I do.
Thank you so much, Allison. And I think the work that you're doing is also very inspiring. When I first heard that you entered into entrepreneurship and you were sort of able to build these different businesses for yourself, I thought that was very inspiring as well. So again, wish you all the best of luck in all the ventures that you participate in. Um, Moving on to the next section, this section is focused particularly on navigating challenges and understanding a little bit more about how our panelists have been able to overcome barriers. So this is a question, I'll ask both of these questions to all of you. I'll call out your name so that you know when you're going, but we're gonna focus on, what are some of the biggest barriers that women face in your industry today? So thinking about your industry in particular, and then reflecting on how can we work towards breaking those down or moving forward with them. And then the second part to that question is on a personal level, right? So getting a little bit more detail about your personal experiences is what are some major challenges you faced in your career and how were you able to overcome it? So I'll start with you, Allison, since you were the last to go. If you can give us some insight into those questions.
Yeah. So for me, I would say one of my biggest challenge was managing my parents and my child. So I actually have my father had me when he was 47. And I pretty much became a caretaker early on. And going into the workforce, people are not so understanding of the obligations you have at home. I I struggle sometimes on how to communicate that with employers or folks that I'm working with that I have dual responsibilities at home. I think also being from a family like my mom is a Indo-Guyanese woman and my father is an African American man, navigating two different cultures and approaching to care for my parents really took me by storm as well. Like my mom is very traditional in her culture and doesn't have the same expectations of care that my father does. I'm a big sister as well. So I come with my family. I don't consider them baggage. They just, hey, they're here. So I've often have to leave. I had to leave jobs because of my responsibility to my family. And sometimes I felt like I failed that job. I didn't get to live out my fullest potential there. Um, but that also led me to be like an entrepreneur, and it led me to be a person that lived a lifestyle that was, again, unconventional. And one of the things that I will just want to share to anyone when you're managing different responsibilities with your home life or your school life or job life is to take personal time too, because I think I got caught up a lot in other people's expectations for me and not necessarily the ones that I created for myself. I turned 30 this year and in January, and I was very intentional about always showing up for myself for this decade in my life. When you grow up with a child right next to you and then you became an adult and your parents now need that assistance, you feel like you work for your family. um and I love that responsibility, but it does weigh. So I would say that's something, one of my biggest challenges of staying consistent with employers, but then it has been my strength of being an entrepreneur and being able to lead my own organizations.
Thank you for sharing that, Allison. It is definitely a challenge that is particular to women in different fields, right? Having to navigate personal life, having to navigate family, having to navigate career growth, and career expectations, right? Family expectations. So, thank you for sharing that with us. But despite all of that, you've been able to build the work that you're doing and also support nonprofit initiatives. So I want to say congratulations to that. It takes a lot of work. Same question. I would pass it on to Aisha if you want to share a little bit more about the challenges, the barriers that women in your industry face, and your personal note. What are some of the challenges that you face?
Yeah, I would say that I think one of the biggest barriers for like not only women, but specifically women of color, in academia is the isolation that comes with being the only one or one of the few, in a space. And I think that lack of representation can make it difficult for women of color to feel like they belong or that their experiences are valued. And I think one way to break down this type of barrier and what I've tried to do is like intentionally creating spaces for each other. So creating reading groups, group lunches, like writing circles, and like even study sessions. But I think these spaces help like foster the kind of networks and mentorship that might not be accessible otherwise. And it's unfortunate that we have to create these spaces and they don't exist for us already. But I think by coming together and like sharing strategies for navigating academic spaces, like lifting each other up, sharing our experiences has helped me so much during my first like almost a year in grad school so far. Um, and I would say one of the biggest challenges for me has been navigating the unknown as like a first gen college student. So like I mentioned, I am the first in my family to apply to PhD programs, and then to like be one in now. That was a very stressful and overwhelming process. But that I didn't have a roadmap for. But I think once I got accepted, there was a sense of relief. But then again, I was like, okay, now what? Because it like I once again didn't have a roadmap. And I was in for a new adventure that didn't have kind of a guide to follow. But I am like a very firm believer in doing things that scare you because that's how you grow. So first it was college. I mean, it was being on a plane and studying abroad, like living in another country for 3 years alone, and now grad school. But I think what really does keep me going during these moments of like doubt and uncertainty is the community that I've built around me and like leaning on my community, and just having that network of like friends who remind me to take care of myself. Something as simple as like eating, you forget to do, like encouragement, like battling imposter syndrome, which you realize even the most brilliant minds in Ivy Leagues, like these professors that you think would never have it, like also have it as well. And like someone said before, like it made me realize that I don't have to go through this journey like alone.
You also touched on so many important points. Imposter syndrome is definitely one of them, which is why I like to encourage everybody in the audience, our students, especially our students, but also alumni present here, that you do, again, reminder that you do have this community. You do have people that you can reach out to, perhaps alums that are in your industry. You just never know where those connections can take you. And more often than not, building those connections can help build opportunities for you in the future and can answer questions. So thank you for sharing that, Aisha. Um, Next, we can go with Emily, if you could share the same.
Sure. Um, I would say for women and other birthing people, I mean, my field is New York and New York City, or New York City and New York State. I'd say the biggest barriers are, like even though the onus shouldn't fall on the patient or the birthing person to get education and figure out how to navigate the system, unfortunately, where we are right now, it requires that. So I think that extra effort is not fair, but still very much a barrier. Um, Racism, not race, is the leading cause. And so I just did like this long post about Black is not a like a risk factor, even though we talk about it like it is in medicine. I think this political climate is a huge barrier because there are no safe zones. So currently in our landscape, we're worried about how to protect undocumented families that are in the labor room, and could be subjected to ICE and harassment, as well as doulas that are undocumented as well, or providers, as we're seeing with these illegal deportations. And then the medicalization of birth is another barrier that I wanted to note, that we're provider focused instead of patient focused. And so a lot of my research is on patient empowerment instead. And so I think that that's really important as we figure out how to measure success, right? Success in birth is not just like an alive, like mother and baby. It's, does the person feel good about their experience? Do they feel empowered? Do they feel in control? And I think that no matter how you birth, whether vaginally or belly birth or cesarean, as we call it, it can be an empowering experience, if you have that autonomy and respect throughout the process. And then major challenges for me, isolation in leadership. Nobody taught us how to do this. We are making it up. And so I think being leaders in the field can be really isolating, like folks have already alluded to, because unless you're in community with other leaders, then you're kind of by yourself. And so creating that community is really important. We are underpaid and underfunded. And so getting access to funding requires creativity. I firmly believe in grassroots initiatives and that we should move funding out of federal government, especially right now, and get more into community-based research. And then that leads me to my next barrier is that, I'm NIH, or I was NIH funded up until a couple days ago when it was pulled. So I'm in partnership with Columbia University, and as you all are probably aware, $200 million in research was pulled. We study Black and Brown people, and so as punishment for protesting, our 7-year guaranteed NIH research was just canceled immediately. So that is the current barrier that I'm facing this week.
Emily, I'm really sorry to hear that too. And we are going through challenging times, and I do want to acknowledge that. I think the work that you're doing is still very impactful work. So it's one that, we have to continue to figure out how can we push it and move it forward. Because when I first heard about your story and the work that you're doing, first thing that came to mind is navigating the healthcare system is already difficult. Getting access to quality healthcare is already a challenge, right? And so taking that a step further, what can mothers do when they're expecting? And that involves so much emotion. So I just hoping that there's opportunities to continue moving the work forward. It's very important, very impactful. Thank you for sharing, Emily. Dr. Judith, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you. So Aisha, you mentioned earlier the imposter syndrome, especially when you're a student in these Ivy League settings and you're the only one of you. And so you doubt everything you're going to say when you're going to participate in class, when you're going to hand in assignments, so the importance of community is so important. And I'll put you on later on. There's a Latinas completing PhD group on Facebook that was so instrumental and so helpful to me when I was working on my doctorate. So I'll put you on if you're not aware. But for me, so that was a challenge, the imposter syndrome. But then also as I, began to navigate the field, I realized, which is why I do what I do now with my students, the lack of representation in the field and also the lack of mentorship available to students. And so, I'm in a unique position where I am in administration at Children's Aid, but then I'm also an adjunct professor. I did 8 years at York College, which is with CUNY. I'm going into my second year at Lehman College, and which are both, minority serving institutions. And then I've done some time at Columbia and then at Fordham as well. And so for me, to be able to be that sort of the representation piece for students to look at me and say, wow, if this woman who looks like me, sounds like me, came from a neighborhood that I may have come from, can be where she is at now, why can't I, right? So I love being a mirror of a possibility because I didn't have that coming up. 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, I don't remember having professors at City College that looked like me, that I felt I could present myself as my full Bushwick, Brooklyn self and be accepted and understood, right? So now I love to show up in my classrooms, talk to my students with, the hood lingo, and they're like, oh, Dr. Gil, let me find out. I just love it. It creates a sense of psychological safety for them. They come to me with issues that pertain nothing to classwork, just like their own personal lives. And we're able to work around some of those things, get them the assistance that they need, the resources. I didn't have that coming up. And so for me, it's really important now to be in these spaces and give that back to them. Specifically, not to alienate other groups, but specifically my Black and Brown students, because a lot of them come from situations where, again, they're the first in their family to go to college. I can go on and on here with, some of the reasons why for me it's so important to assist those particular students. But so yeah, the lack of representation and the lack of mentorship opportunities. And, I've had students who have graduated with their graduate degrees 5-6 years ago, and we still stay in touch and they still reach out to me. We've gotten together for coffee, kind of helping them out, navigating through their careers. Because it's just important. I remember I did it all really with no guidance. So I want, especially future generation of social workers to sort of know that they have the support when they need it. So that is all I have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Judith. And I would do want to make a plug that Dr. Judith is part of our mentorship program. It is a new initiative that we've developed as part of our Colin Powell School Alumni Relations Program. And again, it's with that effort and that idea that a lot of our students are the first in their family to go to college, are the first in their family to pursue higher education, right? To develop a career for themselves. And oftentimes, we don't have that mirror, myself included. I'm also an alum of the Colin Powell School, right? So it's so important to have opportunities like this, just to see what other alums are doing with their career. How are they navigating, and also what challenges they faced? Because I think it sheds light into how we can navigate our own career and passion. So thank you for sharing that. moving into industry insights. So this is meant to give more or shed more light into the daily work that you all do, and dive a little deeper into how you navigate that work. For Dr. Judith, I'll start with you again. We are seeing that more and more there is a focus between mental health in the mental health field, and being connected to social justice and advocacy. And I want to hear from you about how professionals can push for more systematic change within the field and create more representation while also supporting clients. So if you could share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, social work as a profession is rooted in social justice. It's not just becoming it. That is one of the core tenets of the profession. In fact, it's all over our National Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics, right? And even if I think about the values of the profession, so advocating for marginalized groups and oppressed communities, and promoting the dignity and the worth of individuals. So that is what we do as a profession to begin with, right? And so the first thing that we can do is obviously, and again, and let me just backtrack a little bit. With social work, there's so many different aspects of social work, right? There's advocacy, there is case management, there is mental health services. And so in every aspect of the work, we are able to sort of help clients, whether it is connecting them to resources, connecting them to community agencies for particular services, whether it's food insecurity, housing, prenatal care, mental health. Then we have like the mental health aspect of it, which is the mental health treatment, right? Helping folks navigate their mental health diagnoses, helping them explore and process what's happening with them. Why are they feeling this way? Connecting them to like psychiatric services. But on the one-on-one, it's really helping, a lot of times social workers are the voice of the client. Sometimes our clients come in and they don't feel empowered to show up and advocate for themselves. A lot of times, unfortunately, the systems that they're involved with take advantage of that, right? So a lot of the work that is done with our clients, especially again on that one-on-one level, is to empower them, to educate them about resources available, to empower them about their rights, right? And advocating for the policies that are going to address some of the root causes of mental health, again, going back to food insecurity, housing problems, community violence, for example. I think it's also important to consider how important providing trauma-informed care is, and work that is culturally competent, right? It's important to think about how a person's traumatic past, a person's, generational sort of history with trauma, and race, and how those things show up in a person's lives and how it impacts how they show up in your office, in your place of service, and how all of these things are systematic. I think it's important to connect clients when we're thinking about systematic, some of these things that are happening systemically, to empower them to build alliances with community agencies, so with schools, with hospitals, to community programs, and connect them with those services. And they're just making sure that the work that we're doing is heavily client-centered, supporting our individuals, again, advocating for broader change, and sort of balancing all of that. But I think the work really begins on that one-on-one sort of level and interaction with our patients.
Thank you for sharing. Emily, I'll follow up with you. I know doulas and midwives have historically been undervalued, despite the critical work and role that they play, right, within birthing care and maternal health care, right? I want to know a little bit more about how you foresee the profession evolving over the next few years. And also, what advice do you have for students that are interested in maternal health advocacy work?
Yes, thank you so much. So I want to just define the difference for folks. So a doula is a non-medical professional that is an expert in prenatal, birth and postpartum care. And so we're really like mothering the mother and helping them through the process. Whereas midwives are medical providers that, like, you either pick a midwife or you pick a doctor for your care. And so midwives specialize in low risk births. And there's a lot of debate about what is like I'm 37, right? Some doctors would say that that's high risk. I would disagree, you know. So, high risk, it varies depending on the type of provider, but midwives specialize in low risk. I would say it is devalued because like not by happenstance, but intentional racism that started in slavery and the experimentation of Black enslaved folks against their will without anesthesia, and then that continued in like the creation of medical schools and the smear campaigns that were happening in the 1920s against midwives. And so our future, I think a lot of folks would agree, is in midwifery care. I think it's the solution to a lot that we're facing. Doulas, as a doula myself, I think that we are a band-aid to a really broken system, and we need to figure out ways to support and change the system itself, instead of trying to fix it in the ways that we are. Like it's really broken. So the future, I would say, unfortunately it is much needed to be a doula or a midwife or an obstetrician, especially right now, depending on your field. Like as Judith was saying, there's a lot of intersectionality. Sometimes I feel like a social worker. Sometimes, some people go into birth work. You could go into advocacy. You can go into research. You can go into lactation and feeding. You can go into postpartum care. There's a lot of different perspectives that you can take, or a lot of career fields. And then, yeah, like just continuing to follow your feet and, that balance, like Allison was saying, between passion and skill. I think you should always pursue the thing that brings you the most joy, that like the gifts that you have, and find the field that fits them. I'm really focused right now on helping create certification pathways for doulas. So I saw in one of the questions that like someone was like, oh, something about out of hospital birth. Doulas and midwives are both mostly in the hospital because that's where 97% of people are birthing. So we are wherever people are giving birth, So that's in the hospital, out of the hospital, home birth. We're supporting them. So really just following your feet and continuing to find that field that the world needs you in.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. For Aisha, many students are interested and also passionate about climate change, right? I know you were a climate policy fellow, but many of them are also unsure about how to contribute. So if you could share about some meaningful ways that they can get involved, both in environmental and conservation efforts early in their careers, from experiences that you've had.
Yeah, I think this is such a good question. And I think students, especially those of like from marginalized backgrounds or students of color, have this tremendous pressure to change the world and to find a career or job that will allow them to do that. And I think it's very honorable, but it's also a very burdensome task to put on yourself and to do it alone. So I think we're also often fed like this very romanticized like blueprint of instant and like global ways to like change the world. And I would say like don't try to change the world by following what you think is like the cookie cutter conventional way to enact change. So for me, it was like going abroad and releasing baby turtles, right? And I think you can simply like change the world by doing what you're good at and what you're passionate about. And there's so many people that are doing incredible, like meaningful and impactful work. And that's because they find their passion and what speaks to their strengths. So whether that be writing and going into academia, or like organizing on the ground, or creating maps of like climate change, there's really so much that you can do. So I would say take the time now to really explore and like cultivate your interest in where you can possibly like best contribute your skills, because that is a pathway to like enacting climate justice. And I think it's also really vital to work collectively with groups of people who have the same goals, who have the same ambitions and interests as you, because by working together with like-minded people who all bring very diverse strengths to the table, you have a much better chance of having a more meaningful impact. And I guess just a reminder, like I myself have also felt very overwhelmed by like this weight on my shoulders of like trying to do good and impacting the world and questioning whether I'm doing enough. And I think it's really important to remember that for many of us at CCNY, simply like attending college and existing in certain spaces is already a very revolutionary and radical act itself. So like just keep this in mind when you feel like you're not doing enough or you're not changing things. You just may not notice it. And change isn't linear. So sometimes you're not able to see like very evidently the change, but it's adding up long term. And it's a process. So yeah.
Very true. Thank you, Aisha. For Allison, for you, the question that we wanted to ask is that real estate and construction in general are industries that are often or traditionally male dominated. So a question for you is, how has your experience been like as a woman in the field, a woman entrepreneur in the field? And also, what advice do you have for others that are looking to both break into the industry, but also start their own work within that industry?
You know, Leslie, when I seen that question, I had so many emotions come through my head, and I really reflected on my journey in this industry. One, I'm building in South Carolina. You can let that sink in for a second. Uh, in 2023, South Carolina was the fastest growing state in the country, and it's also the year that I moved here. Red state. They're not purple. We're not considering any other color. It is what it is there. And actually, interesting enough, Emily, there's been some laws passed about women, if you lose your baby during pregnancy, that's a felony. So and for whatever reasons. And I'm sure you've heard that there's some issues around DNCs as well. So I just say that to say on this women's panel this month that your body is not safe in every state in the United States. And I often feel that sentiment and fear now living here. But when it comes to construction, I would say that I had an interesting barrier to entry. I call him my best friend. He's an 84-year-old man that owns a company and they do surveying. And I was so persistent at his door, he actually let me into his car. And when he let me into his car, he stated, I've never had a Black person in my car. He took me to a farmer's market and we bought some collard greens, and he introduced me that day as a builder, and it forever changed my look on my life because I never envisioned myself as a builder. But now I own that title and I'm happy that I took that ride. Right. Here it's really a race thing. It's the color of your skin that moves the needle. But I have leaned on my skills and my ability to meet people where they are. Also, when I was in college redlining and I thought I was an ethnographer. I was an ethnographer, guys. So on my anthro majors, I see you. Um, and I always had this fascination about spaces and places. So I studied like the Great Migration from the South to the North, and I'm like, whoa, this is the Great Migration from everywhere to the South. And I knew that it was my time to bridge the unconventional look of a builder or a real estate developer. 9% of developers are women, and I don't know the percent of women of color. So that just tells they're not even counting. And I like statistics, so I look into stuff like that. With that being said, I knew that I would have issues with traditional lenders. I knew that I would have issues with permitting and going to the government office. So it's ironic because my builder is also a man of color, and he told me straight that he sends a representative up there to file his permits because they want to see someone that looks like them that they can feel like they can relate to. And I'm coming from New York City where most of the rooms that I was in was very diverse, and I went to public school in New York City where I had like one person that was white in my school. Majority of the folks were people of color. So that was a different reality for me, to be in these rooms where no one looked like me, but also no one cared what I had to say. I am always going to lead back to volunteering and getting involved locally because then they seen the power and the passion behind my drive, and then they needed to include me because they couldn't, in my opinion, move the needle the way they wanted to, but they had a person here giving their time for free that was willing to do it with them. So I would say, being on the ground and doing the work without pay, and again volunteering at Habitat for Humanity and then landing a job there was just all a summary of that part of my character, but also I would say becoming well versed in the industry. So I took it as I didn't want to just be a developer that was building homes for anyone. I wanted to be someone that could tell you about your soil composition and how this house is going to be sustainable in the next 10 to 50 years. What are some of the things you'll need to look at for home ownership? I would never forget I had clear and graded my property, and it was actually on the well, it had been built and I was about to put it on the market. And there was this tree. I have a fascination with trees. I don't want to cut them. I think that they're useful. And I was standing there looking at this tree from the ground, from the street, and I said, I have to cut this tree because in the long run, the roots are going to grow under this family's driveway, and they're not going to be able to sustain that driveway as long as it should. So I really started making decisions that I felt like I would want someone to consider about when they're doing things for me. And sustainability was one of the things that I prided with my company. And then I just wanted to add when I launched Coexist Research and Consulting, it was my first business that I launched in 2020 after I had left my traditional role at the Department of Transportation. I worked in public space there, overseeing plazas like Times Square and 34th Street. Um, I found that I wasn't I wasn't filled in that position. And when I launched my business, it took me 6 months to get my first contract. And I would say, like, some of the things in that industry when you go into consulting is the fear of rejection in a sense, because you're coming at it like, I'm a consultant, I know things, but someone has to say, okay, I believe that you know things and I'll pay you because you know things, right? So it took me a while to really wrap my head around rejection, and really putting myself out there. And what did that look like uh, for me? Because I had that at that point had only worked traditional roles, and now I'm going into organizations saying, "Hey, I see there's a problem." I think one of the things I had to learn was not overselling myself and undervaluing what I had to offer. So I never could really figure out my price. I thought, well, if they give me a position, then hey, whatever they're going to pay me. But I had a mentor that told me it's okay if you thought that you were going to steal that client and then they couldn't afford you. And I think hearing that really transitioned my thought around like my value and what I was bringing to the table. Moving forward, one of the things that really stuck out to me during this journey of managing both and being in two totally different industries, Coexist really does marketing for small and mid-sized businesses specifically. And one of the things about coexist that I like to say with JCO as well is that I'm the CEO, yes, but who am I serving? And I always think about the people that I'm servicing, and really tailoring my business to them because that's what drives me is people, and impacting their lives.
Powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. I think the point there is also knowing your worth, and valuing your worth. So thank you for sharing that as well. I do want to move on to an opportunity for the audience members to ask questions. I know there was interest in getting some advice on what to do, if you're interested in your particular line of work and industry, how to get there. But I think it'll come up in the questions. So I do want to give the opportunity for the audience to ask questions. So if you can drop them in the chat, we can read them. But also, if you just want to use the raise hands feature, we can call on you. Just please mention who you're addressing the question to for our panelists. And if we don't get questions, we will move on to the last, the last portion. Um, Anybody has questions for our panelists? Okay. Well, what I will add is if we can do a very quick rundown of advice, and maybe keeping it short, since we are close to time and I want to be respectful of your time. If you have advice for students and recent graduates that want to get involved in your industry, what's one thing that you would recommend for them to do now? We can start with Allison.
I have like really simple advice that I would
Yeah.
say. Have a firm handshake, all the ladies in the room. Do not be scared to shake someone's hand really hard. They remember you about that. I have a guy that calls me handshake, FYI. So I always like to tell women that. Also, you know, one of the things that you'll see is that one job, like when you graduate from school, if you're a psych major like I was, you do not have to become a psychologist, okay? That's not what that means. I do not like when people think, oh, bio major, biologist. No, there's so many roles that you can get into. And really, your first job out of college should not be a reflection of your 10th job out of college. It should be something for you to get your feet wet in the door. If the pay is not that good, hey, take it. Just go in there looking to grow your professionalism, look to grow your network, and always do the professional development. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Aisha, same for you.
Yeah, I think my advice would be that a gap year or gap years is okay. I think there was a bit of taboo around them when I was an undergrad. I don't know if that's changed, but I think it's important to remember that like you don't have to rush into a career or like a grad school right away. It's okay to take time for yourself to either work, save money, like travel or step out of this familiar bubble that like you grew up in. And I think you'll find that actually a lot of graduate programs would prefer to see that you have these worldly experiences, and they will be like a tool that you can use when you're in a graduate program. So yeah, gap years are good, so don't be afraid of them.
Thank you. Emily.
Yeah, I think I said it earlier, but really just following your feet. When I look back, if somebody would have told me that I was doing what I'm doing now, I wouldn't have been prepared for it at 27
Yeah.
or 25. You know, like even the veterinary medicine stuff, like I realized like, oh, I needed to learn how to do consent to a nonverbal patient. That's what animals taught me, or how to listen like actively. And so there were skills like I could easily look back and be like, oh, well, that was a waste of time. Absolutely not. Motherhood taught me so much. Dueling for 10 years taught me so much to be able to do the leadership and research that I'm doing now. So really, taking advantage and like sitting down and learning, and the things that you're learning now is purposeful for sure.
Thank you, Marie. And Dr. Judith.
Yeah, so everything that my colleagues said, but also I think it's important to, when you show up, because you never know who's in the room. You never know who can be your mentor, who can be your next employer. I mean, I've had, again, because of my dual positions, I've had the privilege of offering entry level, social work positions to some of my students because they showed up in the classroom, they gave it their all. And for me, it was like, this person would be an excellent clinician. And so I think it's important to show up with everything you have and remember that you never know who's watching, who is who knows who. And that's also part of developing that professional network in certain disciplines. It's not so much about what you know, but who you know. And so always keep that in mind.
Thank you so much. In light of that, I will share that after we're done with the discussion, early next week, we will be sending out an email with more contact information so that you're able to connect with our panelists, right? Again, you never know what a connection can bring to you and mean to you in the future. So I definitely want to encourage our audience members and our students to connect. And I want to say thank you again to our panelists. Again, I already got to hear your stories when we had our initial conversations, but it's always great and always a pleasure to learn more about your career trajectory and how you were able to navigate your career post graduating. So thank you so much for your insight. Thank you so much for your time. And to the audience members, I hope this was a good conversation, a good discussion for you all. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.